So how do you think this is going to impact gun shops in Connecticut? Is this going to close gun stores?
I sincerely hope not, but I do believe that this legislation was put forward for that purpose. It wasn't to solve a problem or to get at some legitimate concern. It was to create a tool to put the firearm industry out of business through frivolous litigation.
Welcome to Lock and Load Podcast. My name is Josh.
And I'm Michelle.
And we talk to you about Connecticut 2A issues. Today, our special guest is State Senator Rob Sampson.
Yay.
Hello, Rob.
Hello there. Thanks for having me.
So Rob is from the 16th District. We have had him on before. That covers Southington, Woket, a little chunk of Waterbury.
Cheshire.
Cheshire and Prospect. Yeah.
Cheshire and Prospect. I always forget Prospect.
It's a really cute town.
Yeah, they have a gun club over there.
They do.
So we are post 2025 session. What a fun-filled session it was.
Are you relaxing a little bit?
Yeah.
I hope.
You're on your summertime.
Still pretty busy doing all the things I didn't do for the last 2 months before the end of session, paying the bills, just even opening the stack of mail.
Yeah, well, the last 2 weeks, you guys are stuck there, aren't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
You basically sleep in your office.
And I'm the first person to get there and the last person to leave because of some of my responsibilities at the Capitol. So
that is, yeah, because you're the debates go to the wee hours in the morning.
Not all of them, just certain ones.
Some do, yes.
Sometimes. I mean, ideally, we avoid as much of that as possible by negotiating ahead of time.
I think
and that's
good.
Kind of my responsibility. I serve as the screening chairman for Senate Republicans. So effectively, each morning, we have a little tiny round table with a few of the leaders to discuss what the Democrats want to do on any given day. And we determine how we're going to respond, what kind of pushback we're going to give them. And, as we get closer to the end of session, obviously we get a little more power where we're able to dictate. We know you have these priorities. You can pick from these. So we have a lot more to say about what actually gets done at the end.
Really?
But they're so slimy, they do terrible things. Like this year, they took the state budget, which was really only going to be a couple hundred pages, and they turned it into a 700-page document by adding in, God knows what, all these other policies that we successfully blocked and stopped. It's very frustrating,
it was
to have that
3
happen.
days before the session ended, right?
Right.
How do you add policies to a budget? Shouldn't it just be finances?
Yes, it should be.
Okay.
And isn't that done? But isn't the budget supposed to be done next session? Isn't that why you have a short session?
No.
No.
The budget is typically done in the first year of the biennium. And in the second year, we come back and make adjustments. And it's not unusual for them to stuff things in the budget document itself. Sometimes the budget is made up of just the kind of spreadsheet of numbers and then a separate document called an implementer. This time they actually combine those, which I prefer, because sometimes you'll get people that are voting for the spreadsheet, but then voting against the policy that goes with it. And that doesn't make any sense. So
that leaves a blank check. It works
exactly.
out so much better.
It's so irresponsible to do it either way.
Well, the fiscal guardrails is kind of the key word, right? That everyone agreed to, and then they've kind of gone out the window this session, it looks like.
Right. Well, that's a long conversation, but what's important about it is that in 2023, which was just one session ago, one budget cycle ago, we came in and unanimously, Democrats and Republicans, agreed to abide by these fiscal guardrails, spending cap, volatility cap, bonding cap, etc. And we didn't even make it through one budget. Here it is. It's the very, very next budget cycle, and they're already blowing right through it.
Well, because they've lost funding because of their policies. So they had to blow through it in order to keep everything they wanted.
Actually, they haven't lost really anything.
Really?
The Trump administration has not withheld any significant money from the state of Connecticut.
Then what are they talking about when they say they've lost all kinds of money?
They just want to spend more. This state budget actually increases spending almost 14% over previous cycle. Can you imagine?
It's insane.
Oh my God.
I was first elected in 2010. So January 2011 was my very first budget that I ever saw. And it was around 17 billion. Today, that was for 1 year. So you're talking 34 billion. Our budget, including all the Medicaid pass-through funding from the feds and all that, is probably double that today, or very nearly that. Can you imagine doubling the amount of spending and taxation on a state
in less than 15 years?
Like 15 years. And that's what's happened. And really, the big issue is that during the pandemic, obviously during the Biden administration, they were printing money like crazy and giving it out like candy, especially to blue states.
Inflation.
Yeah. So you have this rampant inflation, you have all this extra money and all these extra programs that were created during the pandemic. And now all these people are looking for those things to continue. But there is no extra money coming from the feds.
Well, my husband and I
So
have
they
talked
had to
about
raise it
that.
from the people of Connecticut.
You know, we look at where Connecticut with their budgets, where they put things and what interest groups or organizations, however you want to look at it, are being funded. And a lot of them, in my opinion, should do some major fundraising on their own and not rely on the state to support them. I'm all for certain organizations. I'm not all for our tax dollars supporting it. Like what happened years ago when you had breast cancer research, but it was done under that organization and they raised their own funds, or at least most of their own funds.
Right. Well, that doesn't work for the Democratic Party. Effectively, I mean, that's their business model. You know, their business model is to create people that are dependent on them being in power.
Well, yes,
that's what they do.
Then they keep voting for them.
Yeah.
Like the Office for Gun Office Prevention, whatever the hell it is, that was from the federal level. Like CAGV, Newtown,
yes, they were getting money off of
Action,
feds.
whatever the abbreviations are, they get money.
One of the most shocking parts of that state budget that we just passed is that there are page after page of non-government organizations receiving, you know, as little as $4,000 or $5,000, but sometimes hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. And you go and look some of these organizations up, and they don't even exist. They don't have a Facebook page. They don't have a website. It's like, who are these people? And then you dig a little bit deeper, and then you're like, oh, well, there's a sitting Democratic state representative who's on the board of directors. I mean, how is this even possible? But that's what's going on. And you know, look, I mean, not to turn this, you know, we're here to talk about the Second Amendment primarily, but you know, while I got your listeners, I'll just say, I mean, this is the Democratic Party's business model. It's all about creating dependency. And for them, they will always fund their primary special interest group first, and that's state employees. That's number one. They take care of them first. Everybody gets a raise, make sure they're going to continue voting for Democrats along with their families and other people that are relying on them. And then it's all of the special interest groups, all of the nonprofit organizations that rely on state money.
Well, the unemployed, the ones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And anyone who's on an entitlement.
Yeah.
You're getting housing assistance or welfare or Medicaid or whatever. That's number two. And only after those things are taken care of do they ever even consider funding towns in the form of, you know, municipal aid, which is why our property taxes are some of the highest in the whole country, is because this Connecticut Democrats pay the towns last. So the towns end up having to make up for their loss of income from local property taxpayers.
It always baffles me that they don't look at other states that are more
balanced,
not even balanced, that are cheaper. Your cost of living is cheaper, but not necessarily your groceries and all that, but your taxes, your everything. Okay. And
implement that.
Well,
like where states don't have sales tax and they still pass their budget.
Or like you buy a house in another state and your house tax is $700 and it's 3 times bigger than what I own with a lot of land.
Or there's no such thing as car tax.
But you look at those things, you would think you look at it and go, okay, what are they doing differently? Maybe not go whole hog, because most of those would not be the party that we have running our state, but at least take a little bit of this or that, because they do that with gun rights. They watch what other states are doing, and if they're stripping it and getting away with it, this state's all on board going, oh, hold my beer, I can do this better.
What a perfect transition into our little plan here.
Connecticut is the gold standard for democratic government. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, that's why everything costs some money. And of course, they create the problem and then they blame someone and then they come up with a solution that makes the problem worse. I mean, this is what they do. I mean, you know, the housing crisis, you know, housing crisis. Well, where did it come from? The fact is that things cost a lot because of democratic policies. Right. The fact that there is so much government associated with everything. Businesses charge more because their costs have gone up because of inflation and the mountain of regulations. And even the minimum wage is driving up the cost of things.
Yeah.
The local businesses that are property owners or landlords have to respond to the cost to put a roof on a house, which costs 3 times what it did 10 years ago, or the property tax bill, etc. So, I mean, what do you expect? This is why rents cost so much. But then, we're going to blame the rich landlords who are just trying to get by the same as anyone else. So they come up with some other level of government that costs another additional amount.
Right.
And their answer is just to keep, taxing, the successful, hardworking people and giving out free money for others. That's their.
I'll never forget when I got my first annual report notice, and I looked at my accountant because it was my very first one. I didn't know. And I said to him, I said, do I have to give the state like all my finances? Because to me, an annual report is a financial annual report. And he goes, oh no, that's just your fee. And I'm like, then why don't they just call it a fee instead of an annual report? And he goes, because it sounds better if you call it an annual report. Yeah. And I went, but it's true. If people don't know, if you're not in business, if you don't pay these different fees and fines, they don't see it as, they go, oh, well, you have to do an annual report. Of course, that should obviously.
On the fee aspect, something now from the gun side, which I have to go and pay this year through Southington, is the local permit to sell firearms expires in October for me because it's been 5 years.
And you haven't been grandfathered in.
And well, I was grandfathered until then.
Right.
And so I called the state because I was like, I like to make sure, like, if it's going to take time, I need to go know what I need to do. And so I ended up talking to records down in Southington PD, and they're like, oh, just a couple days before is fine. But like, you have to bring down a check for $200. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was part of HB 6667. And I'm like, oh, that's another $200 fee.
Just keep charging. And then, by the way, oh wait, here, we'll mess with you another way too. We'll make it so that they can sue you after you pay us.
So we're going to start going through some list of questions here. I mean, they're kind of generic-ish questions. Maybe it sets up another question or two here, but so you in Connecticut are one of maybe nationwide, who knows, but at least in Connecticut,
not even just one. He is the
strongest voice on the Second Amendment in Connecticut. What was the most dangerous bill you fought in this legislative session that we definitely haven't talked about on this channel at all?
Gee, this is a tough question. I don't know if I can get to. Can I have multiple choice?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's House Bill 7042, which was the bill that created liability for firearm manufacturers, retailers, distributors, basically anyone along in the industry.
Industry members.
Yes, firearm industry members. Oh yeah, I had a tough time during the debate keeping the lingo straight.
And what is that? Because that could be manufacturer, distributor, but the way
it's not holsters anymore. Remember?
Correct. I got that out. But going through the whole thing, it could just be a regular gun owner, because when you look at the way that it was written,
right,
they can stretch it out. Which, if you own a gun,
doesn't
mean you're in the industry.
If you were part of a transaction,
because you sold the gun to the gun store sold it to Bob, and then Bob did something with it.
Right.
Are you a firearm industry member now?
Which is so silly, because you're a civilian, but yet when you read it on its face, there's so much that they can put into it, that they can read into it, whatever the word we want to use, and make it go, no, that fits you.
That's kind of the idea behind the legislation.
I know.
It's not really about writing a specific policy to solve any specific problem. It is about opening the door to litigation for the express purpose of basically terrorizing the firearm industry and putting them out of business.
Yes.
And not through any sort of legitimate claim, but through a series of frivolous lawsuits. And all they need at this point now is somebody with deep pockets who's willing to facilitate that and start making lawsuits and claims against
I know a few
things.
that will do that. Just saying.
So do you think that this lawsuit is gonna, October 2nd, right? October 1st, it goes into effect. October 2nd, we're going to see a lawsuit at a store in store in Connecticut, or are they going to just go after the manufacturers and possibly the wholesalers? What do you think?
It's hard to predict, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw all of the above.
Okay.
And I believe that there is a concerted effort to do this across the country.
Oh, I think they're working on it.
I don't know that it's going to happen right away. I think what they want to do, and this is just me speculating at how evil and sinister the forces are that are against us. I think they're going to try and put this in effect in a lot of other states, and then simultaneously just invest a ton of money in frivolous litigation.
Well, I have to
say, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether there's a legitimate lawsuit against a small gun store. The fact is, any lawsuit you have to pay to defend, and
get your money back.
The way this bill is set up, you don't get your money back, and in fact, you could end up paying legal fees on top of any, result. I mean, it's really very one-sided.
Well, and it's interesting because they kept saying 9 other states have done this. So it started irking me the end of March that they kept over and over. We kept talking about how there were these 9 other states. And that came up during testimony when one of the anti-gunners told Sasram, and he was like, oh, really? And he just bid on it, but he didn't do any research. I know he didn't, because I, in turn, got on the computer and
You know how to use one of those?
I know how to use it. I don't know how to fix it. Yes. So I typed in and I asked about manufacturing liability, or industry liability bills what are these states? And in it comes up with a couple that have said, made it stronger that they cannot, like stronger than PLACA. But I didn't get through the whole 9. I got about 5 printed out and I read them in these other states that did pass some sort of a liability and it opens it up to civil action. However, none of them are anywhere near what Connecticut just did. They're very specific, if they're there, on what can be sued, what can, how, what situations. Some of them are just simply, it enforces more so the straw purchases and this kind of stuff, which they're already federally illegal. Like,
Right.
go
These
after
are already crimes. I mean,
correct.
The argument that they have this in other states, I think, is a specious argument. They don't have this in other states.
They do not.
It's like saying, they tax their residents in other states. Okay, well, does that mean they have an income to state income tax? I mean,
yeah.
Everybody's there
taxed.
is civil liability for firearm industry members in every state, depending on the circumstances.
Correct.
And if you're actually caught doing something that's already criminal, like selling to a straw purchaser, certainly,
absolutely,
but not like this bill. What
No.
people need to understand about this bill is effectively what it is it's an open door to say that anything that happens down the road, years down the road, that has to do with a firearm can be traced back to whoever sold it, whoever manufactured it, whoever transported it between those parties. They can all be held liable, particularly if they have deep pockets, for the actions of a third party in the future that cannot be foreseen. And they use language like, a reasonable person stand. I mean, anything's easy in hindsight, but the fact of the matter is it's really just inviting lawsuits.
So what do you think they mean? And obviously, like, you read this bill and we'll get to like amendments later and everything, but what do you think, because it's not defined, they mean by reasonable controls, and we'll say readily convertible. So let's break the reasonable controls first.
He's got his
Rob
bill,
pulls
guys.
out a packet that
He's got his whole bill.
Well, I mean, I debated the bill on the floor in
watched
detail.
for many hours.
Yeah. And I circled all of these terms and I asked a lot of these questions on the floor and I didn't get answers.
There's no answers.
So to give you an answer, I would just be my speculation. And the reason why they use those terms is because they don't have concrete answers.
There's no guardrails.
But I feel like if they're making a law, then it should be clear and concise. Like step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like this is what should be done, right? So like FFLs have to have an alarm system, right? That's pretty simple, right? It's a rule that's in place. Like you have to go and pay your sales tax. That's a rule in business. Like reasonable controls. Well, my controls are going to be different than the gun store. It's going to be different than Hoffman's, than
even
Connecticut Arms.
It's one of the ways we're going to attack this law, by the way, if we actually put together a legal challenge, is based on that clarity. Because as you pointed out, laws are supposed to be clear. In America, we live by the rule of law. We don't live by the rule of people, which is what we're morphing into. The Democrats would like us to actually see bureaucrats in charge of things. And we see it already. There's various state agencies, where you're not actually going to court. You have to go sit before the state agency. I think of the Election Enforcement Commission, for example. I mean,
divorce. They do the same thing in divorces now, too.
They are judge, jury, executioner, everything. And there's no way out.
Yep.
So, the fact of the matter is that, the way it's supposed to be done in this country is that laws are supposed to apply equally to everyone. They're supposed to be clear. A layman should be able to read it and understand. And if that is not the case, then I think that there's already a standard. It's called void for vagueness. And this is something that is used in litigation to overturn bad laws on a regular basis, and then be one of the arguments that I would make in court, that this law is void for vagueness because it creates an unfair standard for firearm industry members that they can never live up to.
No,
because the idea that you're supposed to put in reasonable controls, who the heck knows what that is? And you could be trying to defend it 10 years or 20 years later. Well, you didn't put reasonable controls in place to foresee what happened 20
And you
years in
can
the
believe you
future
truly
that had
did.
nothing to do with you.
Correct. Correct. And you can truly believe you did everything you could do. It's sort of like you talk about Josh when he got broken into, reasonable controls. Well, he had bars on the walls. He had the alarm system. He had lights outside. He had all this, and they drove
a
a
car.
car
Right.
through it.
Well, that means
So
that's
now
an exact argument.
my new reasonable controls, right? Concrete blocks, right? We're not going to go into other details of that. You can see those. There's other things you can't see,
Right.
but that's you can see from the street.
But at the end of the day, could they argue out that you're still not there? Yes, they can.
Of course they could. I mean, before you had your concrete blocks, it could have been argued that you didn't have reasonable controls in place because you didn't have concrete blocks.
Right.
Because you didn't think somebody would drive a car into your building.
Yep.
You know, it's just, that's the kind of madness we're talking about. And one thing that is very important to note is that it's the state that has the responsibility to create the reasonable controls.
Really?
Well, of course it is.
Well, yes,
I
if
mean,
you're making the law,
the
yes.
whole point of having background checks and everything else is them putting the reasonable controls in place.
So is SLFU going to come out with something?
Well, here's the deal, because they asked, is the state responsible?
That was my question in testimony, because I said, and I brought it up,
yes.
I said, we're a point of contact state. So when I call for the background check or run it electronically, right, we're going through the state of Connecticut and they contact NICS to run the background check. So if I'm going to be held liable, should the state be held liable? Well, I think so. And should the person running the background check, the employee, they should be held liable. They're the ones clicking yes or no.
Well, and here's the deal. We already know there's flaws.
Yeah.
So,
no.
And some people get through accidentally and then they have to backtrack, but they don't find out until they go to buy a gun.
Yeah.
So we already know that these things happen and that this is a possibility. I don't know whether it was both the House and the Senate debates on this, but I know at least one of them, they said, well, yeah, if SLFU makes a mistake, then yes, they can be held liable. And I went, how? State's not going to sue themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, the whole idea, the state is responsible. Okay. I will put it in those terms, but liable, I'm a little tongue tied here. I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but I'm one of the people that in the Judiciary Committee, we have claims that are filed against the state come before the legislature to be voted on. I vote no every time. And the reason why is because I don't like the idea of making my neighbors. That's who the state is. I mean, if the state has to pay damages to someone, who's paying that? The taxpayers.
Yes.
And I don't want to hold my neighbors responsible for the failure of some state agency or state employee or a policy created by the state. That's not their fault. So, it's a difficult situation. It's a catch-22. They're certainly responsible. You set up this scheme for how you're going to do background checks and what the standards are, then you should be able to say that you've done everything you can.
Controls?
That's correct. Those are the reasonable controls. And, I did offer an amendment in the Senate to say that as long as you followed the law and you went through the process that is required by the state and the federal government for background checks, et cetera, then you've satisfied the requirement for reasonable controls. And of course, that was not acceptable to the majority. They voted it down on party lines, which means they want an open door policy to be able to sue people for anything, whether it's unforeseen or not.
So question on maybe the legislative process. I think I know this, but maybe I'm wrong. So it passed the House, goes to the Senate. You throw up amendments. Let's say amendment got passed. Does that then go back to the House with the amendment?
That is correct. Yep.
Then it would have to get passed.
Yep.
And then once it got passed from them, then it would go to good old Ned.
That's why
correct.
They don't like to ever pass an amendment.
Well, that's what then I was going to say, because you're near the end of the session here, that gun bills, no?
It's phony baloney. I mean, the fact is that they can do anything they want to do, and we do. You will see bills that go back and forth between both chambers. We've had it happen several times. The bill gets changed in one chamber, goes back to the other chamber, gets changed again, got to come back. Yep. It can happen very easily if the parties want it to happen. And, the Democrats control both chambers. It's a simple conversation between Matt Ritter and Marty Looney. We got to do this. And it gets done. And certainly if it was to improve a controversial bill that is going to make the minority party happy, so we're not going to debate it, obviously it's a no-brainer. You just go ahead and do it. So that's just an excuse they use. They got loads of excuses we can't do your amendment, Rob. It's a great amendment. We can't do it, of course, because, it would have to go back to the other chamber. So we're going to pass a bad law, is what they're saying.
Well, that's what 6667 was. And then didn't you have to jam through a fix-it bill before the end of the session? Because like open carry, for that example, cops, I don't think we're allowed to open carry anymore. And that original text of that bill, or like security guards, like they did like Dunbar or something, or Brinks. And then you guys had to like jam through a fix-it bill after that or something. Or
sometimes they make a change in another bill. They did that this year. They jammed a bunch of policies into the budget, as I mentioned. And one of the things that they discovered is that they would have created a huge cost for prevailing wage for the Department of Transportation. So they put the fix in the bonding bill, another place it doesn't belong. I mean, but this is how they operate. Meanwhile, these same people will tell me if I want to add a comma to a bill that it's not germane and therefore my amendment can't even be voted on. They're unbelievable hypocrites. This is the danger of one party rule.
Lovely.
So, and again, this is kind of following that aspect of the readily convertible. So what do you think they mean by like readily or easily convertible? I think was an actual terminology in there. Are we talking...
And be careful not to give anybody any ideas.
Well, we've talked about it on the podcast, so I'm asking your interpretation of this. Are they talking about Glocks? Because that's always a topic with the illegal Glock switch. Are they talking about that? Are they talking about like maybe fixed mag rifles? Because that's another conversation that's gotten brought up.
Talked about shotguns. It could be
anything. Shotgun, yeah. But what do you think?
In my professional view, none of those things apply. I wish that my opinion meant something, but certainly they want to open the door to anything at all. I asked on the floor whether you could foresee a sawed-off shotgun simply by looking at a shotgun. I mean, of course you can. I mean, so how can you ever sell a shotgun again?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, we can just ban hacksaws. That'll solve the problem. Or every saw. Make saws illegal.
You can't, because those aren't killing machines.
But they make shotguns.
They have dual purpose.
Short. So no, it's illegal.
No, they have other reasons, other purposes. Guns don't.
They don't?
No, they miss out on the whole sporting aspect.
Or hunting.
Hunting.
Because you don't hunt with shotguns, right?
No.
There's no such thing as turkey hunting? Oh, okay. So those boxes that have the little turkeys on them, those are just...
No, you shoot rifles.
Color
it's
them
called turkey shooting. You just shoot a rifle at.
Gotcha.
Good.
So how do you think this is going to impact gun shops, ranges, instructors? I don't think it'll impact but gun shops in Connecticut. Is this going to close gun stores?
I sincerely hope not, but I do believe that this legislation was put forward for that purpose. It wasn't to, as I mentioned before, solve a problem or to get at some legitimate concern. It was to create a tool to put the firearm industry out of business through frivolous litigation. That's what it's for. And all you need is some willing, legal entities. I mean, look, all of
Joshua Koskoff?
Yes. Well, this all stems from that case. It stems from Bushmaster v. Soto. That's where it comes from. They realized that this was an avenue to take where we can get around the federal prohibition. That we didn't talk about it yet, but the whole advertising liability is another insane aspect of this bill. You know that Matt Ritter, the Speaker of the House, said in an interview right around the time that this was being debated that even selling an inexpensive firearm could get you in trouble, falling under the purview of this law. By effectively saying that this could easily fall into the hands for criminal use because it's inexpensive.
So we're talking high points and Tauruses here?
Yeah. I mean, it's just madness. I mean, clearly this is not a legitimate policy discussion. This is people that are hostile to an industry, hostile to the freedom of American citizens to defend themselves, in fact. And that's their avenue to go after it.
It's malicious. Yeah. End of story.
I'm worried. I'm worried that there are people out there, George Soros type people with deep pockets that are willing to say, let's go file 1,000 lawsuits on any given day against every firearm manufacturer, retailer there is, and see what sticks. And if nothing else, these shops and manufacturers are going to have to defend themselves.
Correct.
And how many of them are going to put up with that? And for how long? I mean, this is their way to destroy the industry.
I've already talked to some people that are like, look, I'm seriously debating whether to stay open. And the bill hasn't even hit yet. No lawsuit has hit yet. They're like, look, even if I get sued, and they kept saying, well, you have insurance for that. you may have insurance for that time. Try to get
They'll
insurance
drop you just like I
afterwards.
got dropped.
That wasn't even a liability.
Ah.
That was, you got broken into. It was just,
And then I had to find new insurance, and it cost me another $1,000 a year.
I don't know how you're going to get insurance. Frankly, I don't know what the insurance industry is going to do here. They'll still continue to insure your premises liability and so forth. But whatever professional liability type of insurance that you would have, you know, I mean, I don't know that they're going to be able to even offer it.
yeah.
If I'm in the insurance industry, I'm like, I'm not jumping on this grenade.
We were
man.
already high risk being in this industry.
right.
Now you're making us higher risk, if not like, full blown red light, or neon light. Maybe that's the one I want. It's just,
this is all the bad news though. The good news is the law is unconstitutional. It is. It's unconstitutional in its face, and it's in direct conflict with the federal law that already exists. All we need is someone willing to tackle that, as a legal challenge
with some deep pockets
and not willing to take it as far as it has to go.
Yes.
Because I don't have confidence that the Connecticut court system is going to come up with justice.
Oh no, this has to go back and forth, up and down through Connecticut, and then bounce into federal. It's going to have to go that far. There's no way around it. I mean, we don't have, I watched during the Bushmaster or Remington when it was up at the Connecticut Supreme Court. I was in the courtroom watching that judgment, and I went up a couple times, but the judgment was the big one. And I was flabbergasted, would be a good word, when the judge said, this is an unconstitutional lawsuit. However, for the children, we're going to uphold it. And I sat there and I didn't have any words, because I'm like, wait a minute, this is the law of the land.
But we'll make exceptions to it.
Right. Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And I knew we were heading that way. And it wasn't a surprise that it was the wording, I guess, that just took me, like, you're putting that right on record. You said that right in front of me. That was your indoor voice and you used it outside. I'm confused. Like, I didn't know. I thought we were doing all this behind closed doors. Wow. You just told me in my face, go basically, have a nice day. Yep. I was like that. And they don't care. They don't care about winning. They don't care about losing. They want to bankrupt because they know the state has more money than most of us small businesses.
Of course they do.
And we
they
already
have an
know,
unlimited amount of money.
Well, we already know, like,
the power to tax, is a pretty good thing. Well, yes. If you're looking for having deep pockets, this illustrates who the actual authoritarians are. We had no King's Day just recently. I mean, who are the authoritarians? The people that completely absolve themselves of any responsibility to follow our constitutional framework or the rule of law, that just want to make their own political decisions, whatever. I mean, it's the people of this country that have let this happen, frankly. And that's what's really sad, is people don't realize that they're giving up their own freedom and liberty by empowering politicians, the courts, these judges at these high levels, to basically take away freedom by the fact that they will make whatever decisions they have because of their positions of authority without following those guidelines.
Well, and it kills me because you watch organizations like CAGV get this money, and the ammo tax that came back around. And the one thing that just stuck in my head all the time is, okay, so the ammo tax, the money for that tax wasn't going in the general fund yet. It was going to go into gun crime prevention, which goes to CAGV or Newtown Alliance or whatever the case may be. And I'm going, so we're going to pay the tax buying the ammo to give to the organization that's fighting to take my rights away so I can't buy the ammo. So I'm paying for this all the way around. The other side's not paying for this. I'm paying for this. And it's like that with every lawsuit. We defend our rights in Connecticut with, gun rights in Connecticut. There's a lawsuit that goes up because we've had one or two. We have one running now. And the end of the day, we're paying both sides.
Yeah.
We're donating in to support the lawsuit, and then we're paying taxes to counteract the lawsuit. That's like,
it's corrupt and illogical. Just like cigarette taxes are illogical. It's like you're going to take taxes from people who are smoking and use it to fund, I don't know, daycare. It's okay. So, but you want people not to smoke. That's why you put this heavy tax on there. So
Right.
do you not want the money to fund the daycare? I mean, you know, make it make sense. Everything that they do in government, in my view, doesn't make sense because it's a collection of very, very bad motivations.
It's special
that
interest, and
people
it's I
have.
want what I want.
That's right.
I don't care about what you want. I want what I want, and that's more important. And I struggle with that because I am truly one of these, we the people, and we put these people in office. The state votes. Now, granted, there's issues there, but on a general basis, the state votes, and we keep putting the people in office that are putting us more into the poorhouse every year. I said 15 years ago, something happened. I can't remember. It was, up in Hartford. And I went, this state is trying to be like the city of Detroit. And I didn't mean it as a challenge. I truly did not back then. And every year it just gets closer and closer. And I'm like, whoa.
Someone took that to heart.
Yeah.
So you brought it up earlier. I actually didn't have it on my notes here. The advertising aspect.
Yes.
So I do a lot of social media, right? Obviously, like you guys watching this are watching in some form of social media, probably YouTube, maybe Spotify, but like maybe TikTok, who knows? So I use a lot of Facebook, Instagram, do a little bit of Twitter. So if I post a picture of a gun, is that bad?
Only.
Yeah. I mean, I asked the questions on the floor. I gave him several
He said
examples.
he didn't see those as issues.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he did.
Oh, he did?
Oh, I think he was pretty clear that anything that I mentioned could be considered an issue.
Because I liked a lot of his answers were just like, well, I wouldn't think so, but I guess. It's like,
right. There was nothing definitive in his responses. It was completely non-committal. We're talking about the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Winfield. Again, I put him on the spot. It's his job.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I respect him, but the fact is you're the spokesperson for the people trying to pass this into law. You should be able to answer these questions. And these are important questions. Like we said, if you're not going to have the rule of law written down in clear terms, then you should be establishing that right there during that Q&A for the purpose of whatever lawsuit happens down the road, that there is some sort of legislative intent on the record on what the standard is. Yeah. And again, I did it to show that they can't even define their own legislative intent. They want an open door policy, a complete trap door. Again, I don't want to talk about the motive of my colleagues, but I think Senator Winfield understood that, which is why he didn't want to make a committed answer one way or the other on any of those things.
But doesn't that show in court?
Because the danger of that bill is not what it does. It's the fact that it's not clear what it does.
Correct. But even him being non-committal shows that also gives an awful lot away when you want to bring it into court that, look, even he couldn't be committed as to what this is.
That's one of the reasons why I did those things. Is because I want void for vagueness. That's what I'm after is have this law struck down as void for vagueness because no one can interpret what it actually means.
I love that you do that. You do that with almost everything that hits the floor, and you're just getting it on record. I actually enjoy. I stay up with you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, at the point that it's coming to me, it's already too late. Right. And I know that. It doesn't matter whether I stand there for 15 minutes or 15 hours or 2 weeks. I mean, if they've gotten to that point, they got the votes, passing. They're going to get it done somehow, some way. You see how they cleverly do these things. When they did 667 a few years ago, they brought it out at like 11 o'clock at night on a Friday. Yeah. And they dared me, talk till Tuesday morning. Go ahead. I mean, I still talked for like 6 or 7 hours. I kept them there till almost 5 a.m. Which was like, all right, you want to play? Yeah, sure. But at the same time, they already have won at that point, and that's the sad part of the situation. So for me, what I can do is use that time for some sort of valuable purpose. And for me, it's setting up the legal challenge by making sure I get the proper questions on the record, or lack of answers.
Right.
Here's a personal question. How much coffee do you go through in a session?
Far too much.
Just coffee? No, like energy drinks?
No, I don't do the energy drinks. Oh. Just never got into it. Plus, like everybody else, I'm trying to be healthy.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot when it
These
comes
are
to that.
these are nice. It's
No.
Sunny D, you know.
I know. I don't do the energy drinks either. I never have. I'll do coffee.
Anyways, how can the average gun owner actually make a difference when it feels like Hartford ignores us? In your opinion?
Vote the right way.
Yeah,
That was not your question. It was Rob's
Sorry.
question. You're here all the time.
there's no wrong answers. I mean, get involved. I mean, that's the number one thing. Look, the only way things are going to change in this state or anywhere is if people change their opinions. You know, we have to win over hearts and minds, and difficult to do when the majority party has very cleverly set up a structure where people are dependent on them, where, you know, you mentioned a little while ago that people are being financially threatened in this state.
Yeah.
Well, not all people. I was thinking while you were saying that, well, I'm financially threatened and maybe you're financially threatened, but if I'm a state employee, I'm not financially threatened at all.
No.
I'm being made wealthy by the state. So of course I'm going to keep voting for those people. In order to get people to start to look beyond their own selfish interests created by their dependency to the Democratic government, they have to start to value their freedoms, and they have to realize that they're being taken away slowly, drip by drip. And that's a tough thing to do. And that means every person that is listening has got to take a personal effort to engage with the people in their lives. That's where it's going to come from. It's going to come from talking to your family members and your friends and the people that you're closely acquainted with. People are not going to respond to simple campaign advertising and things like that. I mean, it can happen. I mean, you look at Trump. Trump is an example of somebody that just kind of took the nation by storm from a standpoint of getting people to open up to an alternate way of thinking, particularly minorities, looking at Trump as somebody different than the traditional Democrats that they might traditionally vote for, to say, look, there is a better or different way.
Right.
And we don't have that right now. I'm hoping we do. I hope there's people on the horizon going to run for significant office in Connecticut that are going to make people start to change their views.
Lovely.
But in the meantime, it's up to us to educate and inform everyone we know.
Okay.
Do you think the 2A community I was gonna say, do you think the 2A community is doing enough to win hearts and minds of undecided voters? I don't know if it's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who the 2A community is in the question. I mean, I'm certainly trying. You guys are certainly trying. This podcast is for that express purpose. So, I mean, there's certainly people that are working hard to win over those hearts and minds. We need more people. And what we need definitely is we need more people that are in positions where they should be. Like, I would say every elected Republican certainly ought to be very vocal about the Second Amendment and defending it. And the few Republicans that are not in support of the Second Amendment need to be replaced with ones that are. And that I would say without hesitation.
That's the next question on there, the bipartisan aspect. Is this a bipartisan issue? Obviously, like, we know the voting records on this bill, and there was a little, and little is the key word here, like crisscross on the aisles. One Democrat senator voted no for the bill, one yes, one Republican yes. Then I think there was 5 and 5 in the House. So do you see it as kind of like a party line issue?
Well, I think it definitely is a party line issue. The fact is that in those particular cases, I would say that maybe our system actually works. You know, that representative government actually is working because those individual representatives felt the responsibility to their constituents to do what their constituents wanted. I know that, you know, our state representative from Southington, who was a Democrat, crossed over to vote no. And I think that's because of pressure from people in his district. Also, you know, I mean, I think it's
did definitely catch flack, especially from me on 6667.
Yeah. You know, so I mean, that's a situation where I think representative government actually might work. It's a little difficult to tell because the Democrats have such extreme majorities. They can let their members vote a different way to appease their constituencies. If it was a much tighter vote and they needed, you know, any individual Democratic representatives vote, I don't know that any particular individual would have done that. In the case of Republicans, I think that they're betraying the value system that they put forward when they said they're identifying as a Republican. And I think that Republican voters in those districts and their local, you know, party structure, Republican town committees in those towns need to look to replace them. I think it's inexcusable. Look, there is far too few people defending our constitutional principles as it is. And in my view, it's only the Republicans at this point. So every Republican's got to do their part.
Agreed. 100%.
Why do you think the media never covers a pro 2A side fairly when we're simply defending the U.S. Constitution?
Because they're already bought into the worldview of the left. I mean, I think that's just typical of Connecticut.
Follow the money.
Yeah, the news media in the state is, mostly, except for a few exceptions, and there are exceptions. You have some smaller publications, some online entities that are fair or trying to be so. And I know a lot of reporters, the reporters that cover the Capitol. Some of them are actually decent people that are fairly down the road, or down the middle rather, on a lot of issues. The problem is that, they'll capture some tape and they'll bring it back to the office, and someone cuts it up, edits it, whatever it is, throws it out. It's just the nature of the beast. I think that the media in this state, certainly the TV networks, the major newspapers, Hearst, they're all left leaning, and it shows up in their writing.
Agreed.
I think media in general has started to do that over the years. And I think it really tipped its point, or maybe like the precipice was kind of like when Trump got elected, or like leading up until that, kind of showed a lot of colors on the not bipartisan aspect. And not just maybe like Connecticut level, but like maybe when I was younger, maybe I just didn't pay attention to it enough, but like you never really saw like CNN or MSNBC or like Fox as like one way or another. And now you do. Fox is considered right. CNN is considered, and MSNBC are considered far left. I think most of them in general just suck.
Trump's been making some changes from what I see on the national level. Connecticut, unfortunately, I think it's a follow the money thing. Where's the money coming in?
Even like following like the break-ins from the gun stores in the past, 15 months, and having them like show up here and not talk to them, and then them tell their side of the story, which was inaccurate, or talk to like Southington PD about it, which wasn't even accurate either on what actually happened, and like not getting the true facts out or putting a little spin on it or something is just, maybe I'm going to say the word insane, but like, that's probably not the right word. Or how they covered like the Woket break-in that happened. It's the news media for you.
I've seen that spin for years, even with CCDL. You always had to be very careful when you get in front of the camera, because you can say this huge, impactful statement
and they'll cut it.
And they cut it down so that it's something you didn't even say. Yep. It got to the point where I stopped talking. Like, I was told all the time back when I first got in, they were like, look, you need to go talk to the media. You need to get in front of the camera. I know why they were doing that. I was like, okay, we'll try this. And I did it once or twice, and both times I think I got screwed as far as the message. And I'm watching it going, that's not what I said. And I finally decided I didn't need to talk to him anymore, because nothing comes out the way you said it.
Yeah. And like with this, like, I don't do any editing with like the main video we put up. Like, I find a clip, I throw that in the beginning of the podcast, right? It's like the little attention grabber. I do our little intro thing, and I let this thing play. And like, I'll post clips, and the clips are, I guess, edited, right? They take out the little spaces and everything. But like the general thing, the full thing is up there. People watch the full thing, and it's unedited. So like, you see
is what you get.
Yeah. Well, that's just like CTN, right? Is that the right
yes
group? Like, the live stream is just there. And it's up there for a long time. And then you can request certain days from them, and then they'll send you the video. We've done that before.
I try and share the full video of the debates that I'm involved
Yeah,
in. I might do clips also, but one of the reasons why I do the full video is so that if there's any question about context, there you go. You can go watch the whole thing. Yep. And some people like to watch the whole thing. Look, I mean, the liberal left is not stupid. They have been very active at trying to change this nation since its inception. I think that the news media, especially the networks you mentioned, have been very biased since they began. There's no question about it. Maybe it's been more obvious in recent years, but they have been. Look, the left realized a long time ago that they needed to take over our universities. So they control education. They control local education to a larger degree through the teachers unions. They control almost everything. They control the entertainment industry. I mean, almost every TV show you watch has got some sort of bias injected into it. They control almost every aspect of what we see as our visible part of society.
Yes.
And to overcome that is a difficult thing. I mean, that's why Trump is so amazing, in my view, from a standpoint of being able to overcome all of that narrative.
Yes.
and to break through and to get people to actually say, well, I don't believe the news. No, I'm going to watch what actually happened is amazing. And I hope that trend continues, because really that's what we need to do to get this country back to what America truly is, which is a representative nation where, people's thoughts and views are actually represented by their elected officials. If you're not watching what your elected officials are doing, trust me, they're up to no good. That's what's going on.
They need to be monitored. I remember as a kid, we used to watch the news as a family. We'd have dinner, we'd go downstairs into the family room, and because we had a split level, and we'd all watch the news. And as a child, it was not fun, but this is what my family did.
Yeah,
so,
used to watch like NBC Nightly News.
Well, I would watch Walter Cronkite and all that kind of stuff, Dan Rather. And so I remember at one point in time, it was before the Cold War had kind of chilled out a little. And I remember looking at my parents and I said, I don't understand. Do they not have news in Russia? My father looked at me and he said, of course they have the news in Russia. And I said, then how come the people don't understand what's going on and allow this? And my father said, that's called propaganda. The government and a certain party controls everything that the people see. There are other aspects out there, but the main majority only see what they want them to see. And I went, huh. And he goes, that's why we have journalism in this country. And that's why we get to see, the facts. Okay. Fast forward. I didn't realize that down the line, we'd be doing the same damn thing here, because I truly believe that's what it is. It's maybe not to that extreme. I'm not sure. I think some channels might be, but it's people in general, today's society want to be entertained and want to have the information shoved into their brain. They don't want to think. We don't have free thinkers as a commonplace anymore, and it's working in their favor to do this. And I think they may have learned along the way how to make it better because they watched these other countries that were doing this thing. And I'm not saying we're communists. I'm not going to say we're fascist Marxists. I think most people out there don't even understand what each one of those are, and it's all just a catchphrase that we use. And they all are different. They might have some similarities, but they're all different. And I can remember my daughter going to school, and she'd come home in grammar school and she would tell me some cockamamie bullshit. And I'd look at her and go, what? And she'd go, yeah, it's right here in my book. Okay, pull out the computer. This is what this is. They were blending amendments from the Constitution together and just kind of blurring over half of them. And so I would go through and I literally indoctrinated my daughter every day after school, and with a fight, because she wasn't supposed to talk to me. She'd tell me, the teachers tell me I can't talk to you because you don't understand. Your parents don't understand. And I'd be like, no. You're my child. I do understand it. We're going to go through this. Today, thank goodness, it was worth the effort. But it took a long time.
What school district were you in?
She was in Region 16, but they're all doing it. Look at
Well, I mean, there's so much there. I mean, I came to talk about guns.
Yes.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about media bias or whatever.
Showing to the right there. I kept going.
I want to say just a word about it, which is that, even, in the days of Walter Cronkite, I mean, there was media bias even then. The difference is, and look, we are nowhere near as bad as Cold War Soviet Union. Okay.
Right.
They had state-run media, only one version available. We were getting there though. In my view, we were getting there during the Obama years, during the Biden years.
Yes.
I mean, you had the New York Times promoting the 1619 Project, which is just going into schools, basically rewriting American history. The fact is that everything that I mentioned before, the entertainment industry, the news media, education, all of them working in concert to rewrite what America is, to say that we're a terrible nation built on slavery and all this garbage. the whole DEI movement, the whole white privilege garbage, all that, was all being injected all day. And there was very little opposing viewpoints. And in fact, there was legislation in Congress to shut up the Rush Limbaughs and the Sean Hannitys of the world, who were the only real voices in the opposition at the time. And we were dangerously close to getting to state-run propaganda media under the Democrats during those years. I am so amazed that we live in a much better country now. Look, I'm somebody who was somewhat hypercritical of Trump. I'm a Republican and a conservative, and I I'm going to vote for the Republican no matter what.
Yep.
I saw Trump as kind of a guy who was mostly a Republican, but kind of a big government Republican, and maybe still is to some degree. I can pick on him on a lot of different things, tariffs, whatsoever. But this is a guy who is a patriot, who loves this country, and he restored the fact that we are a free nation with a free press and opposing viewpoints. I mean, no other thing is more important than that.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's why I'm a huge Trump supporter today, because he basically saved the country, in my view, from becoming a Soviet era propaganda machine under the Democrats.
Well, which is odd too, because at some point in time, you'd think that there would be more as for advertising, which is what Connecticut just screwed up on, more freedom. You should be able to advertise your products without fear that somebody will misinterpret what you've said to make it into something dangerous or harmful to people and say that you promoted that.
And to pick a specific industry and do something that's never been done before under any other circumstances for anything, even where there might be more legitimacy.
So I'd like to see some of that come out too, but I don't think Trump will touch that one. But I would like to see some of that move in that direction. Connecticut will take a while, but even if across the board, we could do something national.
So on the fear aspect, are Connecticut Democrats exploiting tragedies to push gun control without addressing root causes like crime and mental health?
Obviously. I mean, that's clear to anyone who's banked. I mean, even the people on the left would acknowledge that. I mean, Chris Murphy runs to a camera anytime there's a shooting anywhere without any facts.
Silencers.
Yeah, exactly.
To my knowledge, there hasn't been a silencer used in a mass shooting ever. I could be wrong. I don't think there, but because
it depends. Now they're saying mass shootings are like 2 or more. So
I believe the FBI definition is 5 or more.
Chris Murphy definition is
anything.
add is whatever large a number as you want, and use that to exploit your political.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is who they are. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about honesty. They don't care about good policy. They care about staying in power. They care about whatever narrative allows that to happen. That's it. And we can call them out on the facts. And if I had a nickel for every time I debated some person on the political left of the spectrum where they're just repeating things that are completely untrue and non-factual, and I'm responding with the truth and the legitimate evidence, and it doesn't matter because their opinion's just as valuable as I'm like, wait, we're not talking about opinions. We're talking about what actually happened.
He'd have a lot of nickels.
Yes, I'd have many, many nickels.
At least 2.
No, they don't. They heard it. Somebody said it. Facebook had it. Somebody said it. A senator, whoever. They can't possibly lie. They're politicians. Yeah. And the ones that say that to me still to this day, I look at them and go, how did you make it to be this old? Like, you don't have to do any digging to figure this out.
I mean, this is the danger of having, maybe a lack of quality education in some respects. People are not empowered to make their own decisions. They're not thinking about things. They're simply relying on what they consider to be a trusted source. Whatever Chris Murphy says is true, I mean, or even Trump. I mean, the fact is, we got to get out of this cult of personality view of politics and start to measure things based against a set of values.
Free thinking.
But if people are not taught about real choices, real value systems, the difference between living in a free representative system like we have versus powered by authoritarian bureaucracy, if they don't realize the choices, then they're not going to be able to distinguish what's good or bad policy. That's what people need to be educated about.
Well, it's the same as republic versus democracy.
Right.
I'm really getting sick of hearing how we're losing our democracy. but that's just me.
So
I'm less sensitive to that. I mean, look, the founders used the term democracy as well too, but the point is well taken. We are not a direct democracy. That's mob rule. We are a representative republic.
Yeah.
I got a few more questions. I got one question here, and then we're going to go to some Facebook questions, and then I have two very, I think, good ending questions. What do you think a long-term vision for what is a long-term vision for restoring gun rights in Connecticut? Is there a plan? Is get more Republicans in office is probably the simplest answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, getting more Republicans in office is the way it's going to be achieved, but the way that is achieved is by changing as many hearts and minds of actual individuals on the ground as possible. And that goes back to our previous conversation, which is that it's an individual effort, not going to happen by broad-based advertising or some, mysterious, unforeseen politician's going to come along and suddenly everybody's going to start listening to what they have to say. We have to convince our friends, neighbors. We have to show up at boards of education and say, we want our education system restored to the point where people are being educated about what their constitutional rights are and why there's a Second Amendment. That's how it's going to happen until people take a vested interest in making sure that education's improved and that their neighbors know what's up.
Well,
people are unlikely to learn.
Was it Ian on the floor was talking about books in the grammar schools and in the education? And was it
Is that the we'll just say explicit
the
words,
yes.
and then
that's an understatement.
Yes,
yeah, I mean, it's vulgar beyond belief.
And she was
unbelievable.
She was reading
crazy
the books,
stuff.
and Safstrom. So it was on the House.
It wasn't Safstrom.
Was it?
It was. I think it was the speaker.
It was Representative Juan Candelaria, he's a deputy speaker, so he was on the dais and he took the bait. Which you'd think they'd be smart enough not to take the bait. What Representative Dauphiné, my dear friend and one of my favorite, again, put Representative Dauphiné and Representative Master Francesco are the two finest people serving in the legislature. You can have that on the record. Take it to the bank. They will never, never bend or break on our gun rights. I can promise you that. So the thing is that, this is the same thing that has played out in boards of education all across this country where people came and showed up and started reading the books and they get shut down, and it's like, well, I can't say it here in a public forum, but it can be taught to my child. And so Anne just did the same thing.
It was awesome.
It's so stupid of them to let it play out in a way that proves her point.
It was awesome.
Yeah, because it got picked up.
Well, yes. And but I think what she did by proving that point, I'm hoping maybe they'll start making some changes because it is vulgar and, not to sound like a prude, but those are children. Children don't need to be learning that at that age.
This is one of the greatest illustrations of propaganda and media bias that there is, because I will tell you, I've been fighting this battle too. I, went to Avon. I don't know if it was last year, it might have been the year before, with my friend Manju Gerber, who was the president of Moms for Liberty Hartford chapter, to talk about this exact issue. And of course, there was huge demonstrations run by her Democratic representative, who she ran against, actually, basically saying that anyone that has a problem with what is showing up in these school libraries is trying to ban books. And again, we're not the book banners. We don't ban things. We're the freedom people. We just believe that, certain things are age appropriate. You wouldn't have pornos in the school curriculum, would you? Well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about porno in school curriculum. And we're not saying that you can't produce it, you can't sell it. We're just saying you can't put it in front of young children without their parents' consent.
Correct. It's like movie ratings, right? G, PG, PG-13, R.
Yeah.
NC-17, I think, is a rating.
But think about how effective the propaganda machine was on the left to shut down parents fighting to protect their children by calling them book banners. I mean, and literally, if you asked anybody on the street, they would say, oh, yeah, there's these radical people that want to ban books in schools, not understanding what we're actually discussing. And thank heavens for Anne and people like her for actually being able to break through to get people to understand this is not a book banning. This is, a real issue about parents' rights.
It's content. That's what the issue is.
All right. So I'm going to read these questions. Some of these are going to be very simple answers. But Victor would like to know, when, if ever, is the state likely to reconsider or lift the 10-round magazine limit? And is there any realistic reason for gun owners to be optimistic about changes to this restriction in the future?
I would say that there is a significant chance that the Supreme Court will rule on it at some point. They've kicked that can down the road a few times. Hard to say why. I talk to a lot of people that are very knowledgeable what happens in the court, and they say it's all part of a master plan. But I've heard that before.
We don't know what that is.
I don't see that the state of Connecticut changing that law in as long as there's a Democratic majority. And sincerely, I don't see even a Republican majority having the courage to do that unless you had some pretty strong conservative voices involved at the time. I just don't see us changing the law. I think the only solution is a Supreme Court returning that.
We kind of asked this question before, but Brendan would like to know, from the point of view of a state senator, what more can we do as gun owners to try to halt these egregious anti-gun laws, which we kind of just...
Yeah, it's getting more people to show up and look,
know your legislator, both Republican or Democrat. Get to know them.
Know your legislators. Talk to them. I think that's a good answer.
Political pressure, it does work.
I brought mine onto a podcast.
Yeah, if people don't realize, look,
both of mine actually.
The majority does a lot of stuff that they do because they're fearless. They think that they don't have to answer to their constituents, that they can get away with it. And they've been pushing the envelope for a while. Mm-hmm. They're doing crazier and crazier things all the time. But you have to remember that even a little bit of pressure can go a long way sometimes, because there's a lot of factors that you have to consider. Even if you can't convince Matt Ritter or the representatives of Bridgeport, New Haven, and Hartford, because they're going to win 90% to 10% anyway, they'll do whatever they want. They could care less. You got to remember, there are plenty, as the majority grows, and it has been growing, now they have more and more lawmakers that are in swing districts. You got Representative Linehan in Cheshire, doesn't win by much. You got Representative Poulos in Southington. You got a lot of people like this. Those people are obviously a lot more sensitive to what their constituents are asking for. So if you can get pressure on those people, they will in turn put pressure on their leadership to say, don't make me vote on this.
Right.
I know that you got all these other people that vote for it, but don't make me vote on this. Part of the side effect of that is that you end up in a situation where they're allowed to vote the other way. But at some point, it does matter. Things will not happen. Some things will not happen because there's enough of them saying, I don't want to vote on it.
Right. And that's where the pressure, I've always said your legislators need to know who you are, whether they go yay or they go, oh. It doesn't matter. They need to know who you
Someone
are.
lives in town.
Well, because seriously, whatever the reaction is, they're either going to be happy to talk to you or they're going to be like, oh my God, this one never goes away. And then if you're not the only one and you can get several people in that doing the same thing, then they start to go, okay, this is going to cause a problem. They're growing.
When you said, I'm sure Rob thought of a few people.
No doubt.
My senator.
The problem with most politicians, sadly, is that they all want to be universally accepted. And you just can't. You cannot be a principled person. You cannot have a set of values that you fight for without making some people angry. And, too many of my colleagues are just too willing to bend to the point of saying one thing to one group of people that's different than they would say to someone else. And I'll just never do that. I need to be able to put my head on a pillow at night. I'm going to fight for the things I believe in.
Keith says, ask if these lawmakers realize that all the new gun laws will only affect law-abiding citizens. When will there be stricter punishment for lawbreakers? When will they stop this catch and release with felons that have new possession charges? Will they ever lift the 3-gun per month limit?
It's all the same. It's all the same answer. Look, the fact is that the majority party has made the criminal element a special interest group. Yes. It's madness. Yes. But that has happened. That's how fearless they are of their own constituencies. And there's a major disconnect, which I'd like to get into just for a second, which is that I think that the vast majority of people in this state, if you start asking them about individual policy items, they're going to agree with us in this room. They're going to agree about, look, crime is bad. We need to, focus on going after criminals, not law-abiding citizens. We should repeal the police accountability bill. Electric rates are too high. All those things, we're going to agree on these things. What they don't understand, though, as voters, is that their vote actually matters to change those things. And that, if 80 or 90% of people agree with those statements, but yet only a fraction of people are voting for the party that actually wants to make those changes aren't going to happen. And it's for the reasons we discussed, is that there are certain people willing to put the fact that they're a state employee who's benefiting from the Democrats being in power, or they're a nonprofit, gets a check, or whatever it might be. There are definitely special interests at work.
Well, and I know people who are staunch Democrats, and no problem. We'll have conversations. And you're right. A lot of the times when we have the conversation, even though we're completely divided on certain things, we can either come to some sort of a understanding, agree to disagree, but not have this roar going on. Or they go, no, I believe in that. And I go, well, if you believe in that, why are you voting that way? Because they're doing the opposite to you. And they go, well, I just can't vote for a Republican.
Right.
I'm like,
well, there's a lack of information. I think people are not truly informed. There is this sense of disbelief about what their own party is up to. No, I don't believe that. That's not actually happening. Yes,
No,
it is. They're actually doing that.
Or they go, I'm not rich enough to vote Republican. And I'm like, okay. Me neither.
All right, 2 questions. Are you considering a run for higher office to have a broader platform for defending our rights?
Yeah, I haven't ruled out anything at this point. I'm involved in politics because I want to see change in the world, and the decisions I make, everything that I do, showing up here today to join you guys for this podcast, or running for office, or voting on any particular bill, is all about the same thing. It's about who I vote for leadership of our Senate Republicans. Everything I do is all about what is going to get me closer to my agenda of restoring American representation and freedom and defense of our constitutional rights. What's going to get us closer to those things? So if that means I got to run for higher office, then I will. In my view, I don't think I'm a particularly good candidate for governor. I think I could be in some respects. I'm going to actually hold the Democratic candidate, particularly if it's Governor Lamont, more accountable than anyone else. I watch these races and I'm always shocked and amazed and disappointed that our Republican candidates are not taking the incumbent Democrats to task for what they have done. Lamont owns the last 7 or 8 years of what has happened in Connecticut. Every bill that has become a law, he signed off on it. That's just, what a terrible track record. If you can't beat that, then you're failing. But you watch, and, I think our current, group of Republican candidates have failed to do that. I don't think they're really taking Lamont to task, and they need to. So I'm hopeful someone comes forward to do that. I would certainly do that, although I know that I would be a controversial figure, even among Republicans, certainly among the establishment party folks. And that's kind of a problem.
What about because like a Washington thing?
Yeah, we need a unifying candidate.
Okay.
I tell people this all the time. What we need is another Bob Stefanowski when he first appeared.
Yeah.
Yes.
First run.
When people didn't know who he was, right?
Yes.
When he was an unknown self-funding candidate that people rallied around because I think he's pretty conservative, or this guy's got a real chance to win, or he's a businessman, or whatever it was. That's the type of candidate that can win.
Yes.
Somebody like me, there are certain people in the Republican Party establishment that are going to say, no, Sampson's too conservative. We can't have a guy like that. He's too provocative. We need a middle of the road candidate. We can't win with somebody like him. And those people are not going to support me.
Right.
And it's just, it's sad.
Which is insane.
It's, in my view, I don't think I'm crazy or radical. And if you ask them, they'll have nothing to say about why I'm crazy and radical, but they think I am because I'm a principled Republican.
About it. Yeah.
And on the other side of the coin, you're going to have candidates that are very soft Republicans that may take on some very Democratic positions, or have, basically bent over backwards to accommodate DEI or pride flags, or marched with Black Lives Matter, or God knows what, that are not going to be appealing to strong conservative Republicans, and they're not going to vote for them. So right. This is our problem. We need a unifying candidate. So I'm hopeful that at some point we have that person that I can get up and stand behind and propel them to victory. But if that doesn't happen, I haven't ruled anything out.
So I have one question though, leaving with moving up, in politics, but it's not truly a moving up. I don't think. I think it's just a slight bump. How does it work to become the minority leader? Like, I've never seen you in.
Well, you're the deputy.
Is that a
right?
choice?
The leadership structure of each of the 4 caucuses, House, Senate, Republican, Democrat, are chosen by the members. That's how they are selected. And I currently serve as a senior deputy minority leader.
Senior deputy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm at the very highest level of the leadership, but I am not the leader. That is Steve Harding. And Steve was chosen by the Senate Republican members. There's only 11 of us currently, sadly. But we chose Steve a year ago, kind of, at an odd time. It was in the middle of a session. But there are a lot of reasons for that change to occur. And I'm happy to say that I was one of the focal points for why it happened. I was frustrated with our current leadership at the time, and a group of us got together and looked for someone different. And we chose Steve as our option. Look, I mean, remember the collection of people we're talking about. It would be very difficult for me to be elected by that group as the leader. It needs
Okay.
to be somebody that everyone can get. I mean, Tony Wong is a member of the Senate Republican caucus. I don't think I'd have Senator Wong's support to be the leader,
No.
just as an example.
Yeah.
So you need someone that can, be chosen by that group of people, at least by a majority of them.
Okay.
But I will tell you that Steve being our leader has changed things immensely, and we are a far more vocal and forceful Republican Senate now that he's in charge, and that I'm there next to him.
Yep.
And again, I serve very closely with Senator Heather Summers, who some folks may not see as conservative as I am, but Heather is a force to be reckoned with. She is definitely a hardworking person. Between me, her, and Steve, we really have ignited a new vision. My view is that we need to be a bold, bright line Republican Party that attracts people to come to us. That's my view. That's what I impress upon Steve. I think that has worked, and we've become that vision. And now we just need the party, and we need the House Republicans to come join us. And then I think we can be a force to be reckoned with.
But with that aspect being talked about, it, being that line, I actually agree with you, because I talked to a lot of conservative Republicans, obviously. And the biggest disappointment is actually, we expect the Democrats to do what they do. Totally expect that 100%. Disappointment is when we have a Republican light, as I like to call them. And they've been elected in, and then they turn their back on us. And I've said over and over, we need, and even with some of the bipartisan gun stuff, I wish, and this is just a me, and a couple people that I've talked to, we wish that we'd stop the bipartisan. And I know you have to in politics. That's your job. I get that. But what I'd like to see is the Republicans go, there's my line. I'm done. You've got the vote anyway. Go ahead and take it, and take all responsibility for it now.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I'm trying to be careful here, because I want to make sure I give Senator Harding as much credit as he is due. But I'll tell you, a lot of this is my vision that I've been pushing for a long, long time. Look, people don't know what it means to be a Connecticut Republican.
No,
they don't. We don't have a brand that's viable. People like myself and a lot of other elected Senate and House Republicans get elected based on their own reputation.
Right.
People know who I am. They're voting for me. They're not voting for me because I'm a Connecticut Republican. They don't even know what that means. And that's sad. So what I would like to do is rebuild the brand so that people understand, Connecticut Republicans, those are the people that are going to fight for my constitutional rights. They're going to fight to lower my taxes. They can rely on that so that no matter where they are in the state, they can look and, this is a Connecticut Republican. We know that this is somebody that we want to support. That's how we would be successful. That's why we have parties to begin with.
Right.
The whole bipartisan stuff. Look, 70% of stuff that goes through the Connecticut legislature passes unanimously because it's not a partisan issue. It's just the day-to-day running of the state government. But on the things that we're going to fight about, like gun rights or taxes and spending, we need to have those fights. And we need to be principled and take a stand. Mm-hmm. It's very disappointing to me. We talked about the guardrails briefly earlier. As Republicans, we said we're going to stand by these constraints to be responsible to the taxpayers of Connecticut. But then one of the first votes we had this year already was about Senate Bill 1, which was the Democrats' massive expansion of the pre-K entitlement. And the way it was funded was by going outside the guardrails. And several Republicans in both chambers voted yes for it. And to me, that was a mistake. That was a foolish mistake on their part. They could have went back to their constituents and said, look, I support this initiative, but it needs to be funded within the budget. We need to choose our priorities. When we start to fall apart like that, and we have people on both sides of very, very difficult and important votes, it's hard to build a brand. And so those are the disappointing days for me, but there's been less of those than in previous years. We have stuck
Good.
together a lot more on a lot more things.
Good.
My final question. What advice do you have for young conservatives who feel politically homeless in this state?
Well, that's a really good question, but
Wow.
I would say get involved themselves. If you think that there is a vacuum and there's not somebody representing you, go do it yourself or go find someone. You know, there are plenty of people worthy of support. I need support. I mean, I'll be running for something next year. I'm going to need the, volunteers, and there's a lot of good candidates. And if you contact me, I'll tell you who those good candidates are that need help, because I'll be certainly helping people all across the state.
Absolutely. Reach out to Rob. He'll teach you.
All right.
We need Rob
I'll
to
tell you,
teach
I don't know about
people.
teach you, but I'll tell you straight what's up anyway.
That works.
All right. Anything else?
I got nothing.
Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, this is great fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys having me back. I would do this on a regular basis. So
I love having you.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
don't careful
shout
what you
anytime.
wish for.
And we can talk about anything. I mean, obviously, we should spend a little bit about,
Yes.
about the 2A stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, absolutely.
I appreciate it. Oh, thanks for coming on, Rob.
Thank you.
And I'm Josh,
And I'm Michelle.
and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Lock and Load Podcast is sponsored by Lock and Load Firearms, Connecticut's #1 rated gun store and pistol permit class on Google. Come check us out, 1573 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike in Southington. Lock and Load Firearms.
Lock and Load Podcast is also sponsored by Patriot Wear Holsters, custom-made Kydex holsters locally made in Waterbury, Connecticut. www.patriotwearholster.com and use code LNL Podcast for 10% off your purchase. Orders available for shipping or pickup at various locations.